All right, hello everyone. Welcome to today's live stream with Matt Pietrek and Rhum Barbancourt. We have special guests Delphine Gardere and Vladimir de Delva here, who I'm going to let Matt introduce you to a little bit more in depth in a moment. Before we jump in, I'm Will Hookinga from Zavvy.co and just want to give you a quick lay of the land before we jump in. First of all, to your right, you will see a chat window. Feel free to say hello. Let us know where you're tuning in from. I see people from all over already. See Oakland, California. Alex says hello from Haiti. Robin Burr says hello from Miami. Hey, Robin, how's it going? Dave Russell from San Francisco. So some familiar faces. Welcome, everyone. If any of you have any questions at any point in the presentation for our guests or for Matt, you'll see a little button at the bottom that says Ask a Question. Feel free to put it in there. That's the best place to make sure we see it. And we'll try to save some time for Q&A at the end of the presentation. And last but not least, please feel free to invite your friends to join us. There's a share button at the top right of the screen that makes it easy to do that. But with all that said, Matt, I will turn things over to you now.
Thanks, Will. So welcome, everybody. This is, I believe, our 8th session now with the West Indies Rum and Spirits Producers Association. That is WIRSPA. You may have heard of it. This is a series where we're trying to take people, especially during these pandemic times, we're trying to take people behind the scenes at some of their favorite distilleries and actually meet the people who are making the rum. I mean, we all love brand ambassadors and people like that, but you know, sometimes it's good to meet the people who are actually doing the things, who running the operations, and actually get more connected to the distillery. So we've been very happy with some of the guests we've had on so far, and I'm incredibly excited to have Barbancourt. It's one of the major Caribbean rum distilleries that I've yet to visit so far. So I'm hoping to get there soon, but for now, this will sort of have to do. But we have some great content. I've seen the slides and they look really great. So I'm very happy about them. So with that in mind, let's introduce ourselves. Delphine, why don't you start?
Yes. Hi. Hello, everyone. My name is Delphine Gardere. So I'm currently the CEO for Rhum Barbancourt. And today we're going to walk you through the brand and the distillery. And with me here today is Vladimir de Delva, who's our Chief Operating Officer. So we're both going to give you an insight on Rhum Barbancourt.
Excellent. And Vladimir, anything?
Yes, sir. Yeah, thank you, Matt. Yes, as Delphine introduced me, thank you. I'm currently the COO of the company, running the operations, and I've been making rum for about 10 years now. So I will try to give you guys some of my knowledge and show you our great distillery.
It's fantastic. All right, Will, let's get to the slides. You beat me to it. Okay, jump in.
Right. So Haiti has been producing rum since the colonial era. Haiti is actually the western part of Hispaniola and shares the island with the Dominican Republic in the eastern portion. Haiti's been independent since 1804, but we were actually colonized mainly by the Spanish and the French, which gives us a bit of a flavor, a different flavor to our rum, I'd say. Today, there's over 500 craft distilleries in Haiti, and they actually produce something we call clairin, which is generally an unaged rum, generally foolproof. So now going into more details about Barbancourt. The company was established by Barbancourt, who took basically his know-how from cognac production and applied it to making rum. There's a few similarities between Barbancourt and how we make rum and the production of cognac, such as double distillation, as well as the aging in French oak. The company sources its sugarcane from about 3,000 local farmers in a co-op style, just like, for instance, you do in France for the champagne. We work closely with them, and we employ directly about 500 employees. The distillery is today really the iconic brand of Haiti and the most, I think, the oldest distillery of the island, not the island, but Haiti at least. We've been family owned and we've been family managed for now 5 generations. I'm currently the 5th generation of the company to be running the business. So a little bit about the family legacy. I am currently the second female leader of the company. The first female leader was Dupré Barbancourt's wife. When he passed away, she took over, Nathalie Gardere, and she took over the management of the company with her nephew, Paul Gardere. At the time, it was really a cottage industry. So basically, they were running a distillery at the back of their downtown Port-au-Prince house. Natalie was known in Haiti as being a femme voyante, which basically means a really fierce and feisty woman. So there's a lot of stories about her and her legacy. She used to bring, during the Cacos Revolution, early 20th century, munitions to the group she was supporting under her skirt. So actually, this is why my middle name apparently is Natalie. At the death of Paul, Jean, my grandfather, took over, and he was quite visionary as he decided to set up the factory in the plains near Port-au-Prince, and make it into a more industrial complex, working with local farmers rather than make it stick to cottage, really. He was married actually to the daughter of a very prominent coffee exporter. She had about 8 brothers and sisters. So during my childhood, we had a lot of big happy hours with a lot of family members, and looking back at it, it was quite Mad Men styles with shakers and cocktail going around. I think that if any of my family members are connected today, they probably remember some of this. My father took over in the early 1990s when there was the embargo, but he continued to develop the plant regardless of the embargo, but also specifically developed the export market, building partnerships in key historical markets in the US and Italy. And he also did a lot of key projects to develop the plant, such as cogeneration and things like that. I think we'll talk about it later on. My father passed away sadly in 2017, and I slowly took over the helm of the company. I come from a background of investment banking, but also a long experience in perfumery, working at Dior and Hermes in perfumery. And I can say that there's a lot of crossover between perfumery and distillery, which is a quite strange thing to say, but yes. So we can talk about maybe our process. So we have our process, yes. We do almost everything on site and have a very compact structure. So sourcing, milling, fermentation, distillation, all the way to bottling is done on site. So first, let's talk about sourcing. So in terms of sugarcane sourcing, we work with about, as I said before, 3,000 local farmers in a co-op manner. So what's interesting is that, as some of you may know, is that you can do sugarcane with other types of cultures like peas, which are locally consumed. So we're able to help the farmers do 2 types of cultures. So they can do sugarcane and also beans while they're planting sugarcane. We have 80% of our sugarcane comes actually from local farmers. Only 20% is produced by us. We don't use any molasses or syrup at all. And there's generally a 2 days lead time between the cut and the transformation of the sugarcane. We basically have an entire team that is devoted to working with the local farmers. The local farmers are really, how do I say that? We hold their hands as to when they need to, when the sugarcane is ready to cut, when it's, because sometimes, like for instance, they think it's ready to cut, but there's a lot of water, so it doesn't give you the bricks that's necessary, etc. So This is something that's really important to us, is to give them also that kind of support.
Quick question there. So do you have specific varietals that you have the farmers grow, or do you have like just one varietal? Do you have a range?
Okay, so Haiti does have a few ranges, but the main range of sugarcane is called the Madame Muse can, which we call, but it's a hybrid sugar. It's a hybrid sugarcane that exists really in Haiti. And this is something that we are actually looking at with co-ops, is at bringing in new varieties of sugarcane. Because as we've seen is that in the past, for instance, as I said before, in the coffee industry, there's been some diseases that have eradicated some of the species of the coffees. And so what we're looking at today is new varieties of sugarcane. We've already done a bit of a study on it, but we need to bring it to a larger scale.
Right. And in terms of the harvesting, is there much in the way of mechanical harvesting? Is it still mostly hand cut?
Everything is mostly hand cut. We have actually, I don't think there's any mechanical harvesting in Haiti unless I'm unaware of it. Everything is hand cut today. Yeah.
Okay. And you mentioned that you have 5% of the sugar is from your own farms?
Yeah.
Okay. Are those like adjacent to the distillery or just somewhere else?
Around the distillery. Everything is super compact. So now I'm going to hand over to Vlad for the production process, and I'll take over a bit later on.
Sure. Thank you, Delphine. Yes, so just to kind of bridge from where Delphine left and to where we're going, the sugarcane, once it is sourced, and Delphine talked about how it is important for it to be about 2 days from when it's cut to when we mill it. And the reason being is to minimize the formation of what we call the dextrin, which is converted sugars. It's a sugar made from bacterial that we find naturally occurring in the sugarcane that will give you a sugar source that's not fermentable. So it's not desired to have this type of product in your sugarcane. And as time goes, the dextrin level increases, which actually gives you a bad or a lower yield of fermentation. So I wanted to clear that out because it's in the sugarcane industry, it's very difficult to do, and to get 2 days to the distillery is it's something that's very important to us, and we try to keep it like that. So once the sugarcane gets into our facilities, we have a huge scale. It's a truck scale actually from Toledo, and it can weigh up to 80 tons. And so anything that comes in, we can weigh it. Basically, any type of trailer that brings in sugarcane or liquid or whatever we may need that we use by the ton, we can weigh it. It comes in, gets unloaded into our sugarcane storage area, which can hold up to 400 tons, which is about 3 days of milling if we were not to be able to continuously supply our cane. And then it goes into our I would say this is a bac à canne, so basically a tray of sugarcane. This is a French, direct translation from French. And here we have about 1 ton, 1.5 ton of sugarcane in the picture in front of us. And this is where the process starts. So just to give you an idea of the mills, we have a batch of 4 mills in line, which mill 15 tons per hour of sugarcane. And this is the beginning of the process. What we have here, we have a set of knives at first that cut the sugarcane into small pieces as a first step of 48 knives. A second step set of about 24 knives cut it more to open up the fibers of the sugarcane, to expose the fibers, to have a better extraction when it's going to get pressed into the mills. So that's the next step here. So now 2 sets of knives and then the first batch of mills. So it gets pressed, juice is extracted, and gets sent to the second mill. Now before that happens, we do 2 things. We take a sample of the juice so we can know what the Brix is. And for those who don't know, Brix is a sugar level in the juice or sugarcane. So the first thing we do, we take that juice and we analyze it. We know what the sugar level is in it. And we add water to dilute it to the level that we want. And we keep going. And also the fibers of that cane we put water on it to be able to extract some more sugar as it goes. So this process is repeated 4 times. So the first time, I add water, until the end. And what happens is that we get an extraction of about today 85 to 90% of extraction. I mean, we could do better. We're striving to do better, but we're relatively satisfied with that level of extraction. So in order to do that, you need very high pressures in the mills. Now we're talking about 1500 psi. For those who are in bars, that's over 100 bars. That's a lot of pressure, and that's what you need to get all the sugar and the juice out of that sugar cane. Now the bagasse is what's left after the sugar cane's been pressed. The bagasse is the residual sugar cane, if you want, and that goes into our biomass boiler that gets converted into heat and then into electricity. And this we'll talk about later in the process. Now, it is very important that I entered it there again, that we talk about that we don't use molasses or sugarcane syrup. And now, because the process is also not only different in the terms of fermentation, but in terms of the whole milling and the water adding, because some distilleries that use molasses have a fixed bricks. You measure it once and you know your whole tank of 1 million gallon, you know exactly what the bricks is. So it's easy to go on from there. This is a forever evolving and changing process, because as a sugarcane is being milled, you have different sugarcanes. You can have sugarcanes at bricks 18, another one at bricks 22, and the whole time you have to check to make sure what the bricks level is, to know how much water you're adding, how you're adjusting your flow meters, and this is very important. So what we usually do at the end of the last mill, we make sure that the bricks is around 15, a little bit higher than what we use, than the bricks we go to fermentation at. And then we send it to an inline bricks controller that gets it down to 14.5, exactly where we want it for the fermentation. So we're going to the next slide, which is fermentation now. So we talked about what happened in the mill section, and now another control that we do right before the fermentation is we double check the bricks. It's important to us that it's at 14.5. So it's done at the mills, done again in the fermentation section to make sure that's where it's at. Well, it's not fermented yet. So it's like at this point we have sugarcane juice that goes into our fermenters or fermentation tanks. We have 11 tanks today of 18,000 gallons each, and that's where the magic happens. That's what I like to call it. All the sugars are going to get transformed into ethanol, into rum in the future. So,
and all of the tanks open like that?
Yes, they're all open. They're jacketed, cool. They're cool with jackets, not coils on the inside. And yes, and that's all. Like they're all like that and connected to, of course, to the columns. Okay. So now I'm gonna go through the process. So we once the juice is in, we put it in the fermentation tank. We mix it with a solution of yeast because we cultivate our own yeast, and I will talk more about this in a little bit. So for every 18,000 gallons of sugarcane juice, we put about 2,000 gallons of yeast solution that get mixed.
Propagated.
Yes. Okay. Yes. Well, we'll talk about it in a little bit. I know, Matt. I'm sure you have some questions for me. This is going to come in a little bit. Okay. Don't worry. Okay. So it gets mixed in. It's a slow fermentation. It's a three-day fermentation, and what happens during that time is that we do at least 3 or 4 checks on it. When I say we, I say that's usually the lab's job, and we check it with the HPLC, which we check for the sugars, how they're doing, how much sugar we have left, how much ethanol is being produced, and also acetic acid, to know how our fermentation is going and to know really when it's done. So basically, when we don't have any more sugars, we know it's done. And also, you see the bubbles stop. We check the temperature. You see the temperature starts to decrease. The density starts to decrease also. Anytime you're below 1,000, you know you're getting towards the end of the fermentation. We're set. We know the fermentation has stopped, and then it gets sent to the distillery. So the lab controls all this, of course, with the production manager that makes sure that all these things are going according to plan. And at the end, we have an alcohol. Oh, hold on, I'm not quite there yet. You can go back previous slide. There we go. Almost done there. We have a liquid that's about 7.5% alcohol by volume. That's where we want it. We could have it a little higher, but we like it there. We have our reasons, and that's when it's ready to be sent to the distillery. Now I'll talk, Matt, to go back to your question about the yeast and the propagation. Now, and I'll explain how this works a little bit. So at the beginning of the season, what I didn't say is that we operate 9 months out of 12. Sugarcane season is usually from November to July. We could harvest more, but after July, the sugarcane level in the cane is just not good enough for us to go on with it. So 9 months out of 12. So at the beginning of the season in November, our 2 propagation tanks of yeast, we gently pasteurize sugarcane juice We fill the propagation tank, and then we add the dry yeast that is, I could say, made for us because we have all the parameters that we want.
Okay.
We put it in there. We let them multiply. We check them in the lab, microscope. We have different tests, cell count to know how they're doing, how it's good, and then from there we go. So when we're dumping this into a fermentation tank, we use about 3/4 of the tank. We leave a quarter, and we add more gently pasteurized juice again, and the process starts again. And that's how we do it for the rest of the season. And of course, throughout the season, we check our yeast to make sure they're okay, they're good, they're doing good. And there's a reason that we don't like it, we start the process all the way again with dry yeast again.
Okay.
So I wanted to clarify this with you.
Okay.
For you.
Great.
So, yep, we can move to the next slide. So distillation time, and this is a picture. This is right between fermentation tanks, and at the end, if you look all the way down, you will see our distillation columns. And this is Mr. Thierry Gardere. This is Delphine's. Was it Delphine's father? He was our former CEO for many years, and I have to say, a lot of my knowledge, a lot of things that I know, I owe it to this man. We worked closely together in the past, and I've learned a lot from him. So from there we go. So once we have the fermented juice, it's ready. The lab gives it's okay. It's sent to the distillation columns. And what we have here, we have a set of very, I would say, unique or different distillation columns that you would find in a typical distillery in the Caribbean. And we have one system that's divided in three columns, and we use column stills in our distillery. And the first one is a stainless steel column, and the other two, which are more like the first one uses a wash. It's a wash column where we have the fermented juice that's in contact with the steam to evaporate the first alcohol. And the two other columns is more like, I could call them rectifying columns or spirit columns, and this is where the alcohol concentration goes up, and they're made out of copper. In these columns, it's easier copper. We use it for many reasons. It's good for us. We like the taste it gives and everything. The first column used to be a copper column, but doesn't resist as much as the acidity levels that you find in the wash, because we have a wash is very acidic. Its pH is around 3 somewhere, so it's very low, very acidic. That's how we do our fermentation. So we have to change our column to stainless steel, so it's more robust and it can last longer.